The sun is down, the house is quiet, and you are not as alone as you think. Welcome to Ghostly Tales. I'm your host, Mel, and these are stories meant for the dark and for those brave enough to listen to them. Crying at night. The first time I heard it, I figured the neighbors had their windows open and were having a rough night. It was a faint, shaky sound coming from the corner of my bedroom. I ignored it for a few days, but the sobbing didn't stop. It wasn't a muffled TV or a distant argument. It was a woman in total agony. I spent weeks trying to find a logical explanation. I checked the seals on the windows to see if the wind was catching the glass just right. I even unplugged every electronic in the room. I would stand in the middle of the room, holding my breath, but the sound was always there. It was a wet, heavy crying that seemed to move just out of reach every time I moved toward it. I stopped sleeping in my room. I moved to the couch and left the lights on, feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. I kept telling myself there had to be a reason, like a stray animal trapped in the crawl space or some weird acoustic trick from the street, but I couldn't find a single thing to prove it. Then the phone call came. A close family member had been in a terrible accident. It was the kind of news that doesn't feel real when you hear it. You just go numb while the world around you keeps moving. After the long, quiet hours of dealing with the aftermath, I finally walked back into my house. I didn't turn on any lights. I went straight to my room, pushed the door open, and finally collapsed. I hit the floor in that same corner by the window and buried my face in my arms. I wasn't just crying. I was making a jagged, hopeless sound that felt like it was ripping my chest open. As I sat there, gasping for air, I suddenly went cold. I realized I knew this sound. I knew the exact rhythm of the gasps. I knew the specific way the voice hitched right before a long, shaky exhale. I knew the way the fabric of my sleeve muffled the noise as I pressed my face into my elbow. The realization hit me harder than the grief. The sobbing I had been hearing for a month, the misery that had been driving me crazy, was this exact moment. I was being haunted by myself, by my own future. The womb hadn't been cursed. I had been hearing the sound of the moment my life fell apart, weeks before the accident ever happened. I sat in the dark, mourning what I had lost, finally understanding that the heartbroken woman I had been so afraid of was just me. Don't go into that cave. We thought it would be cool to go out to the cave off the creek trail to hang out. We brought some flashlights, a few candles to set the mood, and a Ouija board we'd picked up on a whim. It was honestly just supposed to be a joke. As soon as we sat down and started using the board, everything felt wrong. It got freezing cold out of nowhere, and the silence in there started to feel really heavy. We all stopped laughing pretty fast. Then we heard something moving from the back of the tunnel. It wasn't rocks falling or an animal. It was this heavy, wet, sliding sound, like something was dragging itself over the mud toward our light. Sarah suddenly pulled her hands away and looked like she was going to faint. She whispered that she felt fingers grab the back of her neck and squeeze. Right as she said that, the planchette flew off the board. It didn't just slide. Something ripped it out from under our hands and slammed it against the rock wall. We didn't wait around to see what was coming next. We scrambled out of there in a total panic, leaving the candles and the board right there on the ground. I scraped my legs up pretty bad trying to get through the entrance, but I didn't even stop to look back. Whatever is down in that hole has been there a long time, and it's mean. We left the board in there, and we are never going back for it. We used to play there. Everyone in my town grew up hearing stories about the old prison. Most of it had been torn down long before I was born, but people still talked about what happened there. Prisoners were kept in terrible conditions during the war. Many died from disease, starvation, and abuse. Older people in town always claimed the land never felt right. For a while, the town built a small playground on part of the property. It sounds ridiculous now, but back then no one really questioned it. That playground was where everyone hung out as kids. It had old swings that creaked constantly, monkey bars with chipped paint, and one tall metal slide that got so hot in the summer it would burn your legs. Everyone knew the stories. Kids claimed they saw a thin man standing near the tree line. Others said they spotted someone sitting on the swings when the playground was empty. Some people swore they heard moaning late at night. Most of us thought it was just another story older kids told to scare everyone, until I experienced something myself. I was around 11 and at the playground with 2 friends one summer evening. It was getting late, but we stayed longer than we should have. We were sitting on top of the jungle gym talking when everything suddenly got quiet. No cars passed by, no insects buzzing, nothing. One of my friends suddenly stopped talking and stared toward the far side of the playground near the trees. At first, I couldn't tell what he was looking at. Then I saw someone standing there. He looked painfully thin. His clothes hung off his body, and he looked filthy. His posture was slouched, like he could barely stand. Then we heard a low moaning sound. It sounded weak and pained, and it seemed like it was coming from him. He slowly began walking across the edge of the playground. He just wandered aimlessly. The swings beside us started moving slightly, their chains creaking in the silence. We turned to look at them. When we looked back, the man was gone. We ran home and never went back near that playground close to dusk again. A few years later, the playground was torn down and replaced with a historical site about the old prison. Now the area is a stop on local ghost tours, and people regularly visit hoping to experience something paranormal. The story of the man occasionally being spotted in an old prison uniform is still shared. I have no doubt that some poor soul is stuck there, and honestly, that makes me more sad than scared.
The lake. When I was around 13, my family would go to our cabin several times every summer. It was a small place on a large lake, and our favorite thing to do was swim. We even had our own little private beach. This particular summer, we decided to spend the day barbecuing. The adults were drinking beer, playing music, and hanging out on the beach, while all of the kids were in the water playing and having a loud, fun time. I remember the sunny day started to become overcast, but we didn't think much of it, other than a couple of the adults saying they hoped it wouldn't rain. Looking back, the air was starting to feel heavy and electric. Being one of the older kids, I thought it would be a good idea to swim a little further out by myself. I started to regret the decision when my arms began to get tired, but I could still touch the bottom with my tippy toes, so I stopped to take a break. That was when I felt something touch my leg. It startled me because it felt exactly like a hand grabbing me, not a fish brushing against my skin. Instinctually, I jetted my body back by pushing off the lake floor. When I looked down into the water to see what I was dealing with, I saw something I still cannot explain. It looked like a girl's face looking up from just under the surface. She was staring straight at me with a completely blank expression. I screamed and started to swim back to shore in a total panic. When I got back to the beach, all of the adults came running up to me as I tried to explain what I just saw. I was so confused and shaken up that I don't know if I was making much sense, but they eventually gathered what I was trying to say. A couple of the men swam out to that exact spot, but they never found anything. We even called the police, and they did a search of the lake that turned up absolutely nothing. I felt so invalidated after that.
It was incredibly frustrating to know exactly what you saw, but for there to be zero evidence of it. My family still likes to tell this story at gatherings, but I absolutely hate it when they do. It makes me feel nauseous. I have no idea why I saw what I saw, but I know I wasn't making it up. I will never get her face out of my head, and I never swam in that lake again. We ended up selling the cabin when we had to move across the country, but I will never stop wondering what I saw that day. The peeking head. When I first moved into the house, I was so excited to finally have a place of my own. It was an older rental, a bit drafty, but it had character, and the rent was too good to pass up. For the first month, everything seemed completely normal. I was busy unpacking, painting, and just settling into a routine. But once the chaos of moving died down and the house got quiet, things started to feel off. It began with this heavy, unsettling feeling that followed me around, especially after dark. I'd be walking down the hallway and feel a sudden chill, or I'd feel this intense pressure on the back of my neck, like someone was standing right behind me. I tried to tell myself it was just the normal creaks and groans of an old building, but deep down, I knew it felt different. Then, the visual stuff started. Some nights I would lay in bed reading a book, and I would think I saw a head peek around the doorframe. When I looked up, there was nothing ever there. I tried to just brush it off as my eyes playing tricks on me, or blame it on the shadows from the hallway light, but I always had this nagging feeling that I wasn't actually alone. Then came the night that changed everything. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. I was laying on my side with my attention completely on my book. Out of nowhere, I saw a head pop up from the underside of my bed, right in front of my face. It was a small, pale, childlike face. It didn't look right, and it was just there, staring straight at me from the edge of the mattress. As soon as I screamed and jumped back to the other side of my bed, it was gone. It happened in a split second, vanishing right back down under the frame. I know what I saw, though, and I refuse to think I was seeing things. It wasn't a trick of the light, and it wasn't a dream. I moved my room immediately after that night. I packed up my stuff, set up a bed in a completely different part of the house, and I never go into that room anymore. The warning. It started out as a normal evening. My husband and I were winding down, hanging out in the kitchen, while I stood near the counter. The house was completely quiet. Suddenly, a loud bang shattered the silence. The pantry door violently swung open, slamming against the drywall. Before we could even process it, a can of diced tomatoes flew straight out of the dark pantry. It sailed through the air, rolled across the linoleum, and came to a dead stop right at the base of the stove. We froze, staring at each other in absolute disbelief. A second later, a heavy can of chicken soup launched itself from the middle shelf, followed immediately by a can of baked beans. They both flew on the exact same trajectory, clattering loudly across the floor to join the first can. All three sat in a neat little pile directly in front of the oven door. "What the hell?" my husband muttered, taking a step back. My heart was hammering. I stared into the wide-open pantry, expecting to see a raccoon or some logical explanation. But the shelves were completely still. There was absolutely no one in there. I took a cautious step forward to pick up the cans, and that is when the smell hit me. It was natural gas. I looked down at the dials and realized one of the burners had been bumped, releasing a steady, silent stream of gas into the air. If we had gone to bed, or if someone had struck a match, the whole place could have gone up. I quickly twisted the valve completely shut and threw open the kitchen windows. As the fresh air rushed in, the heavy tension in the room suddenly lifted. We just stood there, looking from the stove back to the open pantry. Whatever spirit was sharing the house with us wasn't trying to scare us. It was trying to save our lives.
I was hiking a local trail about a half an hour from home. I had only hiked here a couple of times. It's not one of the more popular trails in the area, which is why I was out there around dusk. The light was already fading, the air getting heavy with that specific damp wood scent. I was about halfway through, where the old logging road branches off, when I heard it. It wasn't subtle. A clear 3-note whistle, like someone calling a dog, but slower. I stopped. The trail was empty. I looked ahead, then behind. Nobody. I shrugged, thinking it was probably just a bird I didn't recognize, and kept moving. About 5 minutes later, I heard it again. Same tune, but this time it was followed by a laugh. Short, high-pitched, like a kid trying to stifle a giggle. It came from deeper in the woods, off to my right, behind some old pines. My foot just stopped in midair. It wasn't the sound itself that made me freeze. It was the timing. The laugh didn't sound right. It didn't sound like a real, spontaneous chuckle. It sounded practiced, mimicked. "Hello?" I called out. The laugh repeated. Tee-hee. It was the exact same pitch, the exact same duration, an identical loop. I looked at the ground, my eyes fixed on the dark dirt and fallen leaves of the trail. My lungs felt squeezed. I didn't want to look up or towards the sound. My body just said, "Do not engage." I started walking again, but faster, much faster. I was almost jogging. The laugh didn't follow me this time, but the sound of it stayed in my ears. When I got to the parking lot, I practically threw myself into my car, locked the doors, and drove away. Thanks for listening to Ghostly Tales. If you enjoyed these stories, please leave us a review. It helps more listeners find their way into the dark. We'll be back next Wednesday with more tales.